Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Growing Up with Godzilla. Oh my god, my hair is wild today. My name is Donny Winter, and this is my show where I have conversations with Godzilla fans about how they've grown with the character and franchise over time. We are in season 2 of the show, and we've had some wonderful conversations with some phenomenal people. And this episode specifically marks the remainder of my conversation with the ever so delightful Matt Frank. So I hope that you enjoy the rest of our chat. Which largely unpopular Godzilla film is your guilty pleasure?
Oh boy. This is one of those questions where 4 or 5 things enter my mind at once. Because and it's also because I've had my finger on the pulse of the fandom for so long. It feels like stuff that was unpopular, it's like, oh, this has an audience now. Like I was talking to Caston the other day, and I mentioned, like, I was talking about Godzilla 98, and she was like, "That's unpopular," because her experience has been there's a lot of young people who really like that movie, and that was like
Yeah.
their first exposure to the monster genre, the kaiju adjacent genre, and but I am not one of those people. I wouldn't say I wouldn't say I wouldn't say the urge does not sometimes hit me to go ahead and throw it on, and I do, and it's like, oh yeah, this is watchable. This is very
Mhm.
watchable. But um, I feel like the go-to is Godzilla's Revenge because that
Mm.
one has gotten a hard rap for a long time. It was Pusateri's commentary on Godzilla's Revenge on the DVD that really kind of turned me around on it, because he does
Yeah.
a really good job of pointing out the Honda isms and the Kurosawa isms in that movie that kind of make it a little better than it should be, considering it had the budget of like Pocket Lint. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, that's a good one. And then like other stuff like I wouldn't necessarily call it unpopular, but like King of the Monsters, like I want to like that movie so much, and there's stuff in it I
Yeah.
genuinely love.
It has moments of pure beauty and wonder, but then
Mhm.
like for me, there are story and character elements that are just like a sad little firework. And I'm just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, this it's like I'll kind of throw it on, I'll be kind of watching it, and I'm like, oh yeah, this scene's really cool. Godzilla coming out of the ice still gives me goosebumps because Bear McCreary's soundtrack is just
Oh
bumping.
god.
It's so
If
good.
anything, that the soundtrack of that film really, it's almost a character in of its own, like it
Yeah.
really just allows everything to be brought to life. Mothra coming out of the cocoon
Mm,
behind the
mm.
waterfall, sobbing,
Oh yeah,
sobbing, 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 till
I
even to
definitely.
this day. Oh,
Yeah. There's moments where it's like you can really tell that Doherty really gets the texture of Godzilla, the texture of kaiju. He really does understand that those elements. But then a character will open their mouth, and the movie is
yeah.
kind of written like it wants to be a Marvel movie, and and few things are more insufferable than a movie that wants to be a Marvel movie. you
Right.
know.
So remember, everyone, pay your writers because we need them for obvious reasons, and
Yeah.
artists, and your artists too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just, there's and I think the people who genuinely love that movie, again, love whatever you want. I don't care. Just
Oh,
love whatever you
absolutely.
want, love whoever
Yeah.
you want. Just don't hurt anybody. Well, without their consent.
Right.
The eyebrows. Uh, just
Sorry.
that's okay. But
That was amazing.
well, Final Wars is also one where it's like, you know what, this movie is really kind of bad, but it's kind of
But
fun.
it's fun.
Kind of
Like,
fun.
and I've mentioned this on the show before, but like the what's his name? The Exilian second in command,
Oh
such like
yeah.
my gay soul when I was in high school. He was so hot to me. Like, everybody in that entire film are so attractive. Like, if there's any reason I watched them, I'm just like, these are beautiful people.
There's definitely like there's some moments in that movie where I'm just like, oh my god, like oh man, I forget her name, but she was she was the reporter who was like
Oh,
interviewing Takarada-san, and then she kind of has this thing with Don Fry, but yeah, you know, obviously they frame her legs a lot, but there is something about her that I'm just like, you know, she has this very feminine, very soft, but there's an undercurrent of like don't fuck with me kind of, where I'm like, because she like picks up on the fact that like these people are not human, and like and just there's something about her that I'm just like, man, I'm vibing with this. It's that scene where Kinemura is in the radio DJ booth, and he's got that pop star, and that whoever that pop star is with his like his eyeliner and stuff. I'm just like, you know, my young version of myself. I'm just like, am I realizing things about myself? Is something awakening? This Godzilla movie better not awaken
oh my
anything in me.
god. No, I 1000% agree. Like, the androgyny of it all, like, super attractive. Like, no,
Mhm.
I felt the same way during that moment with that pop star. I was just like, guyliner, okay,
It's like, what is
okay.
happening? What
Well,
is
like,
happening?
I think with like, I'm super obsessed with this conversation. But so like, I think for me, like the Exilian second in command dude, like it's just he's just dangerous, wearing
Yeah.
like this leather outfit and like
Yeah, there's
funny,
a
but also like kind of scary. I'm just like, what? Like, am I a goth? Like, I was a gothy kid at the time. I was just like, do I have issues? Like, what's going
oh,
on with
it's
me?
it's like it is one of those things where it's like you're letting borderline letting the intrusive thoughts win a little bit, where it's like, which is and you know what, those contexts of fictional you can explore, so that's why fiction is so great, because you can explore these feelings in a safe environment and be like,
Absolutely.
this is a fantasy, this is maybe doing something for me, in real life this would be a nightmare. um
And the truth is, like, I was performing double duty. At the same time I wanted to be a Mothra fairy and envisioned myself as one, I
mhm.
also wanted to be Exilian second in command's husband, his space husband. So
I mean, you want to be like, I could definitely, you know what? I'm starting to write stuff in my head, and I feel like it's
a
like is
new
a
fanfic idea.
hmm, there's a
Am I gonna
lot of
Mary Sue myself?
black vinyl on display in that movie, and I think they knew what they were like. No, we're doing it just because it looks cool. It's like, yeah, sure you are,
They had an
sure you
aesthetic
are.
they were going with. Like,
Well, the costume designer was, oh, I forget his name, but he's the designer from Metal Gear Solid, which is a franchise that already has a lot of psychosexual stuff going on, and
mhm.
then you know, and I think more than a little bit of that kind of got bled over into Final Wars.
More than a little.
More than a little. Oh man, that friggin' okay.
The title of this episode is going to be a sexual analysis of Godzilla Final Wars.
One of the most
Anyway,
historically
I love
asexual franchises, and we're gonna
absolutely.
we're gonna crowbar this out of it. Oh
Oh
my
my
god.
god. Okay, so
Okay, okay,
I do have a like this is my fun question
okay.
for returning guests.
Hmm.
Um and what is your unpopular or controversial Godzilla opinion?
Mm, that is very interesting, because I have a few. I have a few. One that I got a little pushback on was that I think GMK makes a lot more sense reframed as a dark comedy. Like, I think as when we were younger and this movie came out, we were all a little bit like, "Oh, it's like the dark and violent, serious Godzilla movie." No, it's not. I mean, it has very
Mm-mm.
serious themes, but the content is nakedly comedic. And
Mhm.
I think that works in its favor. And I've had a couple of people be like, "Oh, that makes a lot of sense," and some other people be like, "No, I don't get it." I was gonna say I actually just got this in the mail. It's the new MOOC, as they call it, the Godzilla and Tokusatsu MOOC, and it's the GMK edition. It's got some really good photos in it.
Yes.
Anyway, I think my really truly controversial opinion currently is aside from making a bunch of like LGBTQ like God's kaiju pride memes, really just to troll people, is uh Godzilla, the series, that series I
Mhm.
feel is the best American version of Godzilla. Like
1000%. Absolutely. I 1000% agree with you.
I think that's so interesting that I get pushback on that. And my first question is usually like, okay, so then which would you say? And they'll say the MonsterVerse, and I'm like, but that's still Godzilla. That's still like the Japanese Godzilla.
Yeah.
It's and it's also it's got its problems. Like we love it, but
Mhm.
Godzilla '98 is a rough movie. Like it's got we've talked about it at length.
Mhm.
I got invited to talk on a podcast for like an hour or 2 hours about Godzilla '98, and I said, "Man, I think I'd rather swallow glass," just because that movie is so. Anyway, but the series really threads that needle because, and not just because it adapts elements from the Japanese films, because I think that's what people tend to credit its quality for, and I don't
Mhm.
think that's really the. It gets a little bit of that. Um, the thing that I think makes it really work is that it is an American. It's through an American cultural lens, which
Right.
I'm, yeah. Whereas with the MonsterVerse, they're kind of trying to do Japanese Godzilla through an American lens, and you really start to muddy up the themes when you do that. It
Yeah.
starts getting weird. You know,
Well, we didn't like they started to give us the scaffolding for that in 2014, but the film didn't like there was like a drastic shift midway through that kind of like deflated that,
mhm.
you know.
Well, it's the shift from Destroyer of Worlds to like Kaiju of Justice, like the
Right.
Showa Godzilla, the late Showa
Well,
Godzilla.
and I would argue
There's
that
a
it's the shift from like, post World War nuclear specter to
Mm.
primordial god being who yeah.
Well,
Which, mind you, like, I think that there's space for both, but, like, we see instances in the MonsterVerse where they try to connect back to that nuclear specter thing, and it misfires absolutely,
yeah, I
you
feel
know?
like there was a way to do that, and I feel like they kind of fumbled it. But the yeah, the nuclear angle is really, it's hard for Americans to reconcile because we can't really reconcile the idea of Godzilla not being a heroic character. The idea that he is, it's a very Japanese idea that he is this persistent menace, this
Mhm.
persistent looming threat is a very Japanese concept. Whereas in America, we're like, well, we love Godzilla. We want to root for Godzilla. Oh, so fight the bad monsters, or
Right.
maybe it's
But
through his fan
culturally,
base.
do we understand the gravity of that, right? Like, maybe that could be why, like, the MonsterVerse just lacks that gravity. It's because, like, we don't have that context, right? Like, I feel like we could work toward understanding that context more and trying to replicate it a little bit more efficiently, but will we ever replicate it the way that it deserves, if that makes sense?
And that's the thing. I just don't know if we have the cultural toolbox to do that. Whereas with Godzilla the series, it was framed less as kaiju and more as 50s era Americana monster movies like Them and Tarantula and The Deadly Mantis. And there's more of this idea of monsters as, had this. I had like a phrase for this, and it's tough to quantify because there's very much this idea of man versus nature in this constant back and forth between like in Japan in and again, this is broad cultural strokes, but monsters and stuff like that, monsters are kind of something you have to live with.
Mm-hmm.
And they're a part of the world, and you can't just destroy them. Like, you can't just blow them up. Even in Godzilla King of the Monsters, there was this idea early on where they talked about, like, oh, well, they almost kind of were like, oh, well, the government says that we should just destroy the monsters, and we feel like, they actually are, they should stick around. And that
Mm-hmm.
idea of, like, even the idea of being able to just wipe out the Titans in a Japanese film would not come up. Like, that
Right.
idea, it would be, in a Japanese context, it would be a constant uphill struggle. Whereas
Absolutely.
in Godzilla the series, they are these threats coming out of the woodwork, and there's a question of, like, where do these mutations exist? Do they have a place in the world? Should we be respecting that place in the world? But that's constantly at odds with trying to figure out, like, should we just kill them all? There's still this overarching idea that if the American military got its act together, it could probably just wipe out every one of these monsters pretty
Mm-hmm.
relatively easily. But that's why the monsters are more. There's a lot of little details that I want to write an article dissecting this.
You
Um,
should. I would
I
read the hell out of that. No, I think you make an excellent point because, like, if we look at the dynamics of, like, coexisting with the creatures versus, like, just, oh, let's blow them up. Like, that goes back a long way, like, in literature. Like, if you look at, like, American literature, especially, like, that early frontier, like, conquering the wild kind of, like, colonizing mentality, like, I feel like that still very much bleeds through a lot of our cinema, especially cinema that involves any sort of, like, nature related type of narrative. So no, like,
right.
I
Well,
1000% agree with you.
there's two versions of that. Just to bounce off that just a little bit, there's two. I feel like that takes two forms when it comes to, like, a Western-based, American-based cinema and its relation, like you said, its relationship between man and nature. It comes in two forms. It's either you're conquering it, or if you do live in harmony with it, it is 100% mutually beneficial. And
Mhm.
our place in the food chain does not change. We're still at the top of it. Like Avatar, the Avatar movies. Oh, we live in harmony with nature. Oh, it's sad when another animal dies. It's like, how does anything eat? Like,
Mhm.
what's like? It's such a fairy tale version of this harmony with nature concept. Whereas in Japan, and again, it's a generalization. Hello, white guy. Um, it's a generalization of, like, there's they always there was, like, an old Cracked article that has, I might have quoted this before. I may have even quoted it on this show. The Japanese live in a constant state, in a constant knowledge of that they could just be wiped off the face of the earth at any moment. And I mean, obviously, they have adapted to that, but, like, you know, I mean, for God's sake, if Mount Fuji goes up, they're boned. Like,
Mhm.
and it's not, like, super dormant either. It's like,
Right. Well,
and
cuz it's proximity to everything.
yeah, and like, their biggest, social and economic hub is right next to it. So it's it's just a different relationship, and is all this different cultural milieu that kind of
Mhm.
goes through it. And, like, the idea that there would be this independent small team of specialists in Godzilla the series. They're an independently funded small team of scientists who are being consulted on monsters and stuff like that. you don't usually see that in Japan, in Japanese media.
No. If given the power, what Godzilla film would you want to create, or what direction would you take the franchise?
Oh God. Oh Christ. Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is, you would agree with this 100%. Mothra solo film. Mothra solo film.
Why
Like,
not 5? I'm kidding. But no, yes, I agree.
yeah, just like, because like I like Mothra in 2019, but I feel like I I saw this size chart that an artist posted on Twitter, and I can't remember the name of the artist. I'm so sorry, but it was showing the size comparison between like Showa Mothra and Showa Godzilla. And Showa Mothra, well, the original Showa Mothra is gigantic. The idea of Mothra being so huge, and I did a fan art reimagining alongside Sophie Campbell like 2 years ago or something. Um, and I did this reinterpretation of Mothra as like this eldritch, like almost Lovecraftian thing, where it's like she's really hard to perceive. Like, you don't really know what she is. She may not even be literally a giant moth.
Mm-hmm.
She's just, that's just what we perceive as just, there's so much narrative richness in Mothra besides a second fiddle to Godzilla.
Absolutely.
But besides that, I don't know, because like I kind of like a lot of what they're doing. They're doing weird stuff. They're throwing stuff at the wall, and
I like the experimentation, honestly.
yeah,
Like, I know, like, not everybody was a huge fan of the anime trilogy. Like, it's not perfect, but I do appreciate the experimentation. Like, I think a healthy franchise needs to be able to do that.
yeah. They took a shot they took a shot, and it was, maybe it wasn't totally successful, but they committed to the bit. They didn't like pivot partway through. So yeah, one thing that I thought would be interesting is also this whole, another thing about Godzilla King of the Monsters that kind of, even when I first saw it, I didn't sit well with me, was this idea of like Godzilla was just going around and like fixing all the environmental damage and stuff, and this whole notion of Godzilla is this agent of order, like he's here to create order out of chaos, and he create balance. Oh, it's about balance. And it's like, if Godzilla really gave a shit about creating order and balance, he would have destroyed every oil drilling platform and sealed up the hole that it comes from, or
Mm-hmm.
he would have obliterated all the cattle farms in South America that are pumping methane into the atmosphere. He just, again, it's that American concept of, well, if we live in harmony with nature, it has to be on our terms.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's like, so it's this kind of half-assed thing of, if Godzilla is going to be this ancient protector god, then and that was the thing they were kind of alluding to in the Gamera trilogy, where it's like, it's getting to that point where Gamera may not be protecting us for much longer if we're the ones making this as bad as we are, if it's our fault. And that was kind of what I did in Last Hope, where it was like,
Yeah.
okay, this is the end point, people. So I think
It's
those are
true.
the first things that come to mind, because everything else, it's like they're doing a bunch of weird stuff and I want to see it. So
Excellent ones.
mhm.
Now, looking back throughout the Godzilla franchise, like, which scene shook your younger self, and does it still have the same impact on you today?
I really don't want to just keep saying GMK over and over
Oh, do
again.
it. Just do it.
I mean, GMK, I feel like Shin Godzilla was the last Godzilla movie to like really kind of shock me. And that was just because they kept it really quiet, and a lot of the scenes that are really shocking are just weird stuff. Like the first time you see Kamada-kun, the first time you see the second form, is
Mm-hmm.
really friggin' weird. But GMK was the last movie where I was just like, oh my god, I can't believe they did that. And again, a lot of it is kind of played as this dark comedy, but they were so clear in what they wanted to do and how they were going to do it, and stuff like I think the thing that like the two scenes that jump out at me where I was like I was kind of like, no, three scenes, um like the atomic the mushroom cloud scene in that parking
Mm.
lot, the what was the other one, the destruction of the hospital, that
Yep.
scene, and then the Godzilla, his atomic breath blasting out of his neck.
Oh God, that, yeah.
Yeah,
All of it
that
shocking. Like a certain level of grotesqueness, especially with that last part.
yeah, I was like, I had never seen that before, because you think of Godzilla as this completely invulnerable character. I mean, he can get injured, but like,
Well, I think GMK really focused in on Godzilla being kind of invulnerable, at least until the end.
well, that's the thing. Yeah, they're really building him up as being invulnerable, and then this thing happens, and you're just like, oh my god, like I
Yeah.
didn't expect it to be that way as such. And actually, in this new, in I think it's in this book, um, maybe in this book, but definitely, again, Norman England, he posted some set photos, and you can, and there's a shot of the GMK Godzilla suit in like the final scene, and you can really see the big scar on his neck, and it's big. It's way bigger than I think any of us realized, because the scene is really dark on
Yeah.
in the final film. But it's, again, it's like you're not used to seeing, and especially like just that happening was such a shocking moment. And I think it ties into this idea of people who, again, kind of hold Godzilla a little too close to the chest. When Godzilla is shown to be vulnerable, they don't like it,
Hmm.
because it's like, well, no, this is part of my identity, and part of this character's identity is that they're invulnerable. And so, like, I remember people were mad at the end of Shin Godzilla, where it's like, oh, they just beat him with like hoses, and it's like, well, it's more complicated than that, you know.
Yeah, there's a
It's
lot more sophistication to that than just that, right?
But if you're already kind of pissed off about something, and you have an emotional reaction to something, and you want to justify that emotional reaction, you're probably going to simplify whatever the thing is that's pissing you off to make
Hmm.
sure that it keeps pissing you off. Politics, anyway. Sorry, allergies in here. But yeah, yeah. I think that was the last time I was really like, I was like, oh, Lord have mercy. Um, yeah.
No, I think that's an excellent one. Now, so being that we are, this is the final question. Being that we are seasoned human beings and like fans of Godzilla now,
Mm-hmm.
capable of entering these communities and making friends who also love Godzilla. If a person wants to get their friends into Godzilla, do you have any advice for them now? Like as someone who has had experience with that?
That one is tough, because I think some people try to say that there's only one answer, like, well, it's just this movie, or it's the original, or, you know, and I mean, and I'm sure this is an answer that other people have given and will give, but it really depends on the person. It depends on the people that you're introducing them to, because, like, you know, there are people I know who are anime fans who they love Shin Godzilla, and then like, or even GMK is a good one for like, if you're kind of, if you're familiar with Japanese culture, if you have like a passing familiarity with Japanese culture, but you've never really seen any Godzilla movies. And let's be clear, a lot of anime fans have never consumed any other Japanese media. Definitely not
Hmm.
Tokusatsu.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so with or the Gamera trilogy is also a good like window into the kaiju genre, really for just about anybody, but
I
especially
would
for
agree.
people who are, yeah. Um, and then like more, I guess, vanilla viewers, you know, people who maybe are a little more casual with how they consume media. You know, Shin Godzilla is a good one for like, you know, if they kind of know a little bit about Godzilla, but are again passing familiarity with it. And then like, or MonsterVerse is a good like, this is again vanilla kind of basic pitch, like this is the broad strokes. And but the original is also like, if these are people who appreciate classic films, if they have an appreciation for classic films, then just go with the original, because the original, it's like, I remembered showing the original to some friends like years ago, and they didn't really know how to internalize it. They didn't really know how to interpret it because, they just, I think it wasn't what they were expecting. And nowadays, people are I feel like a lot of people who watch movies are a little more savvy about like, oh, movies mean things. And these are broad strokes, but I think the original is a good fallback but it has to have just the right factors. Like, it has to be somebody who, well, I wouldn't even be friends with somebody who doesn't like, who thinks that black and white, I don't like black and white movies because they're old and stupid. And it's like, well, then why am I friends with you? So
I would rage if somebody said that to me. I'd be like, what is the matter with you?
Oh yeah. I just, those people, if I'm like in a casual conversation and like, I like a party or something or whatever, and that comes up, I'm just like, all right, I'm just going to extricate myself from this, conversation and go back to the punch bowl. Yeah. So the original, GMK, Shin Godzilla, MonsterVerse, again, those are kind of maybe obvious answers, but I feel like those are good, like dip your toe in. And then you go from there, like if they like the campiness, roll into Showa, or if it's like, if they like anime, then Heisei Millennium Era is probably going to be their speed. If they really need really modern filmmaking to get them into it, then and like with Heisei, Biollante is the one to go with. Like, no question.
Oh, chef's kiss! Like like the Return of Godzilla, Biollante, like perfect.
It's a good double feature.
Absolutely.
Another double feature that I'm really excited for is I want to do, like, I saw Barbie, friggin' loved it. Did not see Oppenheimer yet. It's so good. Like, Barbie is so good. But I want to do Oppenheimer, Godzilla -1 double feature because they're in the same universe.
That would be iconic.
Yep.
That would be iconic. I am obsessed.
Somebody did a meme that was like, fuck around and find out. It was like Oppenheimer and -1.
I saw that. It was absolute perfection.
So good.
Oh, Matt, this has been such a fun conversation. I always appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to banter with me and to nerd out a little bit. Yeah. So, where can people find your stuff?
Well, they can find me over at mattfrankart.net. I have a Patreon, which is patreon.com/mattfrankart. And you can see, I think down there you've got my YouTube and my the Twitters, the whatever
X.
It's gonna be, whatever it's going to be called by the time this comes out.
The Zitter.
I'm on the other stuff too, Instagram and whatnot. You can find all that stuff through like my link trees and my website and stuff. And I am ramping up, hopefully sometime next year we'll see start production on my original kaiju comic, State of the Monsters, which I'm very excited that people seem to give a damn, because I'm so used to like posting stuff that's like not Godzilla and nobody really cares. But the reaction has been really good. Like, people at G-Fest kept coming up to me and being like, I want to know about State of the Monsters. And I'm just like, oh, well, I'll give you the elevator pitch. So,
Matt, we will eagerly consume whatever you create. Aww. Just saying.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I know Cass is going to watch this. She's going to be like, consume, create. And I'm like, shut up. But anyway.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. As always All the links will be down in the description section of this video. Matt, you're always welcome back, so thank you for doing this. And remember that Growing Up with Godzilla premieres on the first and third Sunday of every month, usually at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So thank you all. Feel free to like, subscribe, comment, all that jazz, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye, my friends.